My name's Jessica Bland and I'm Deputy Director of CSER. So I have been working for some years in technology policy, so working with governments, working in think tanks, working with science advisory organisations, which is closely aligned to CSER's interests. We do lots of technology policy work here. But I really wanted at this time in my career to move back into research, and I don't have a PhD, so for me that meant finding a position where I could support researchers and take part in it, but I'm not going to be the person who's the primary investigator on a big project. And this role came up at CSER, which is exactly that. I get to support the system and the way we work at CSER, and that's most of my work. But I also get to really think more deeply about problems that I've been working practically on for the last decade. So my day-to-day role at CSER is to make sure lots of the systems we use operate smoothly. So that means helping with recruitment, helping with financial planning, working on strategy, dealing with HR issues, that kind of thing. We got to a team of 28 at CSER, and that's why my position was created, in fact, because you just, when you're at that size, need someone who can oversee and take some of those decisions on a day-to-day basis. But that means I also have the incredible privilege of working directly with our researchers as they're developing new projects, as they're trying to ensure they have policy impact with their projects, where I can play a direct role, having come from the policy field myself, and move into supporting individual teams some of the time. So my role day to day is split between those central admin tasks and then supporting researchers to really make the most of their work in this impact-focused organisation. My motivations for working in existential risk actually come from working in lots of areas close to existential risk for a long time, and seeing this as a really good way of focusing lots of issues I'm interested in on the fact that we might face global catastrophes in the future as a kind of extreme scenario to understand how we do things better in terms of preparing for different types of future. So my work has considered features that don't include catastrophes or existential risks, but sometimes that kind of foresight, that kind of long-term thinking can be a bit vague or doesn't feel the urgency that we should take action today, because it's not clear what about that future should lead to action today. But coming into the field of existential risk, by having that really clear focus on the kind of catastrophes we're trying to avoid, I think we really motivate people to take action. I think we can bring a much wider range of scholars from lots of different areas, from volcanoes to philosophy, together in the same space. And by focusing them on specific scenarios, they can see how they could help each other think these through better. So for me, it was taking those ways of thinking, long-term thinking that I've worked on for a long time, and finding a very specific focus of them where we could potentially have more impact on the world relative to some of the projects I've done in the past. So I guess part of my role is not to focus on a particular risk or hazard, whether that's AI or biosecurity or natural hazards like volcanoes or the stresses of those like climate change. It's to sit back and look at some of those commonalities and perhaps how we deal with them. So I think my answer to what are the biggest challenges facing humanity is a bit biased, because it comes from thinking across all the different areas rather than wanting to pick one of them. But the thing that I do notice across those areas is that we continue to try and make a fairer world, a world that can deal with things like pandemics, can deal with conflicts like Ukraine, and can deal with the inequalities we see between different countries, even in moments of extreme stress and tension, such as catastrophes. And there is a big challenge for how we make those decisions in a timely way that supports lots of people, but we're also inclusive of all those people being involved in the decisions that affect them. During COVID, it was really easy for governments to make decisions quickly, but there were two people in a room making that decision. That's not necessarily particularly fair, and it didn't represent well all of the groups in a society or around the planet. So I would really like to see us getting better at being able to create ways of making those big decisions that need to be made quickly, but that include representatives from a wider range of groups. And I don't just think this is fairer, I think that's probably a better way to make decisions. And I think all of our areas struggle from that issue of how you be inclusive, but also get things done. My recommendations for understanding this field is to probably start, and maybe we're a bit biased at CSER about this, with the set of research centres that are popping up around the world. So there are research centres in existential risk in the US, in Asia. There's some centres around complexity we're now seeing in South Africa, Morocco, and a number of centres in Germany and in Geneva. There are affiliated centres working with global policymakers, starting there to see the different ways they understand this topic. Because, for example, our colleagues in the Hong Kong Centre for Existential Risk are really focused on the philosophical questions of underpinning this discipline, which some of our scholars covered here at CSER, but actually mainly we're a place where early career researchers from very different disciplines can come together and really attack and make progress on the issues to do with certain existential risks. And then we have other colleagues, for example, some of our colleagues in the US who are more like in think tanks rather than in academic settings, and they can be more activist and out there and have quick responses to things like the Ukraine because they're not coming from a university perspective, they have a particular agenda, etc. So that sense, I think the best way in is to look at that group of actors, sign up to their newsletters. Many of people's events are still hybrid or in fact just online. So you can attend or dip in and out of those different events, and that would be a good way in. That is how I have really learned to navigate this field, but there's also a lot of people here who want to have impact in the world. So if you send them an email, even speculatively, if you don't know them, and say how your interests might converge with their interests, I would say 8 times out of 10, you're going to get a positive response. A lot of people are willing to jump on a call these days and see what could come of it. And that's a really good way into this research area, which is not just motivated by theoretical questions, but having impact in the world. And people will be looking for new and different ways to do that and need expertise from lots of different areas to do so.